When it comes to the intersexual dynamic between men and women, oftentimes what benefits one might not necessarily benefit the other. What applies to one might not apply to the other. Trauma builds men, but it absolutely destroys women. In order for me to be able to properly explain this, I need to go all the way back to the first conception of man and woman. When God first created man, he created man by himself. He put man in a garden to work, to labor, to strive, essentially to face some sort of adversity. Even though he was by himself, he was put with animals who could possibly bring harm to him, or whatever maybe. He was given dominion over them. Man was made by himself. He knew loneliness, he knew isolation, he knew what it meant to be by himself. That is why when God looked at him, he said, it was not good for man to be alone. So then God created a companion for him to aid him with the isolation, with the loneliness, and he made for him a helpmate. That's when Eve came in. Now, a very important thing when Eve was created, Eve had never known loneliness. The first woman to ever exist had never known any form of trauma whatsoever, and never had to feel any. Because when Eve was created, she already had a pre-designed companion made for her, waiting for her as her eyes was going to open. Adam was made by himself. He was alone. Eve came and joined with Adam. She was never alone. The woman had never known any form of trauma or adversity, so to speak, whatsoever. To take it now forward to present time, I think that, well, I don't really think, I know women need to avoid as much trauma as possible, especially in your younger days. You need to steer away from any possible thing that can bring you trauma, because it is going to affect you someday in the future. Whether you understand it or you realize it now or not, it will very much affect you. Some form of trauma, mentally, psychologically, physically, spiritually, emotional trauma come in the form of family, friends, intimate relationship with partners, and the biggest one of all between the three, there's possibly more that I'm missing, but let's focus on this three right now. Between the three is the family and the intimate partner. But oftentimes what I've noticed moreover, honestly, the trauma that happens in an intimate relationship with a lot of women to a degree stems from the unstable households that they grow in. Unstable households produces unstable children. Unstable children someday grow up to be unstable adults. It's like that. It's like that saying. Remember the guys that say vagina is vagina used to be young too. In their old age, they're saying vagina is vagina. They used to be young too, and they're still saying the same thing. The woman that went through that is unstable as an adult came from being unstable as a kid. A lot of the times, the instability in the family is unavoidable. But if that part is something that could be avoided, what is left is the instability in the intimate relationships and the bad decisions that women make in picking their partners. This is why back in the day, the father would be in charge of picking the partners for the daughter. Because I've noticed that women are not very good at making a long-term decision like that. Women are not very good at making long-term decisions, period. And even more so when it comes to partners, they choose the wrong ones that provide them a certain feeling or emotion now, not understanding that whatever feeling or emotion that they give you is temporary, but the effect that is incurred with those feelings and emotions that they give you is not. It's long-term. It is something that you carry on later into the future. And the reason why it is one of the big threes, and arguably the biggest one that women need to avoid, is You can never bank on the honesty of a woman when a man asks her, "What is your body count?" for her to be honest, right? For the most part, they're going to lie. So most men that are good with women, they know not to trust a woman's answer when they ask them a question like that, or they just avoid the question altogether. But it's so interesting. You can always tell, you cannot necessarily tell how much sexual partners that she's had, but you can always tell how promiscuous a woman is based on how much hate and disdain she has for men. And oftentimes, verbally, they present themselves with words like, men are dogs, men aren't bleep. I sit there and I wonder, who has ever seen a virgin woman who has had very little experience with men spout the same nonsense? Even if her family wasn't, even if her father wasn't in the picture for the most part, who has ever seen that of a virgin woman that stayed clear of bouncing from men to men say something like that? Oftentimes, when women come to the point in which they use language like that or verbalize things like that, it comes from experiencing a plethora of men for them to come to that conclusion. You gotta understand, no woman wakes up and just say, men are dogs, men aren't bleep. That's not how it works. To come to that conclusion comes from experiences that they've had with a plethora of different men. Now, as I said, you're not going to know exactly how many men, but you know it's been a couple. It's been a few. I made a previous video, I believe, somewhat about this topic. And in it, I said that I believe that a woman should maintain the Disney fairy tale to a degree. It is not to say that women should just be delusional, because women can do that all on their own, right? And I also said that fairy tale also has a premise of you not being promiscuous, because the women that existed in those fairy tales in the first place, they were not promiscuous. So if you're promiscuous, I'm sorry, you're disqualified. But for the most part, I have found that a woman is at her happiest when she sees the world in bright colors, pixie dust and rainbows, and a leprechaun at the end of it with a pot of gold. That is when a woman is at her happiest, when she's dreaming about the whole Cinderella fantasy of losing her heel, Prince Charming finding the heel, putting it back on her feet, as she straddles down the wedding chapel, walks down the aisle, everybody celebrating her, this, that, and the third. The Disney fairy tale. Because what is the alternative to that? What we have now. Men aren't bleep. Men are dogs. Woof woof. Right? You're right. Men are dogs. Woof woof. So why is it that you are allowing dogs to cause so much trauma to you that is going to affect you, not just now, but also later in the future? Women need to avoid as much trauma as possible. You need to avoid as much trauma as possible. It does not benefit you to the degree that it benefits men. Because whether trauma makes a man promiscuous, realistically speaking, the world does not care about a man being promiscuous. They care about a woman being promiscuous. This is why, like I said earlier, you can never really bank on a woman to be honest about her notch count. Why is that? Because intrinsically, they know that it's not okay. They know it is not okay for them to have such a high notch count. That's why they lie about it. That's why they lie about it. Of course, most guys just ignore it and pretend like they don't know. But the women, for some reason, do not understand that a lot of men do know that you're lying and that you actually do think that your body count matters to a high degree, whether it's subconsciously or not. Women need to avoid as much, young women, as a young woman, you need to avoid as much trauma as possible. I hear so often women saying, I want to focus on myself. I want you to do that as well. Focusing on yourself also means not involving yourself with a plethora of different men, because it defeats the whole purpose of you focusing on yourself. If you literally have a stacked roster of different men at the waiting, ready at your stead for you to be in contact with a text or do whatever with. That's not focusing on yourself. Like some of you girls think you're Batman or something, trying to have like backup plans and contingency plans. Cut the contingency, because all it takes is for one emotionally spiking event to happen in your life where you will need some type of companion. And trust me, you're not as strong as you think you are. You're still just human. And even more so, you're a woman. Women oftentimes say that they're emotional. Why is it that that only applies to them or it only registers when they're trying to make a point? Yes, I do agree. Women are extremely emotional. Emotions cannot be trusted. They are temporary feelings that are fleeting. They move like the wind every which way. Not much stability or control in them. And in that spike of emotion from whatever event, you might just need a bit of validation or to seek solace in the arms of whomever, just because to feel better. And oftentimes I've noticed that when it comes to women in trauma, their solution always circles right back around sex. And that sex always makes its way right to promiscuity. This is why I say that women should avoid as much trauma as possible. You're a princess. Disney fairy tale. You should be running through a meadow of sunflowers and lilacs flowing in the air. Yes, keep that delusion. Not the delusion of I'm a 10 out of 10. The delusion that you're in a freaking pixie dust world. Keep that. But also carry the step in the shoes and in the light of the woman that exists in that fairy tale. How was Belle? How was Snow White? You think Snow White was throwing it back for whomever while she was laying there half dead? You think Cinderella, while she's scrubbing the floor every once in a while, she'll sneak somebody into her stepmother's house? Lock in. Avoid trauma. Avoid trauma. You cannot and will not be the one woman. You cannot and will not be the 1% of women that don't actually get screwed royally from experiencing a huge amount of trauma. You're not it. You're not it. Because a lot of women like to believe, oh, generalities is irrelevant. The exception is what matters. The 2%. Forget the 98%, the 2%. They want to focus on that as if they're the 2%. Or as if it's a prevalent thing that happens. You're not the 2%. Sorry, you are not the 2%. You're the 95. That can't handle it. Stay away from it. It is better to stay away from it and not find out whether or not you can actually handle it than run right to it or let it come to you and then find out that you cannot handle it. Because what happens in two? You run away from it, you don't know whether you could or couldn't handle it. You live a fairly decent life, more or less, based on how much effort you put into that decent life you want to live. You go run into it, and then you find out you cannot handle it. Now you're screwed. Because you wanted to touch something you shouldn't have touched, just like Eve in the garden. God made everything for man and woman to survive, to live, to thrive, to be happy. But it was not enough for Eve. Do not be Eve. Let it be enough that the trauma has not come to you. Do not run to the trauma. Stay away from it. Do not eat the fruit of trauma. You cannot handle it. And that's okay. Nobody's going to hate on you for avoiding trauma, because look at the women that didn't avoid trauma. They are royally cooked. If somebody was to ask you, would you want to be in those women's shoes? Would you actually say yes? Would you want to be in their shoes? More likely not, the answer is no. So why would you do the same things that got them to where they're at? They say that the definition of insanity is doing the same things over and over and over and over again, expecting a different result. How are you going to walk the same path of the woman that you don't want to be like and expect a different outcome of what she got. That makes no sense. Stay away from trauma. It does not benefit you as a woman whatsoever. Run from it. Nobody's gonna diss you or hate on. Run from it. It's okay. You are just a girl. You're literally a girl. Stay away from it. You're just a girl. Nobody is urging you to chase trauma. Run from it. You're just a girl. Be a girl. Just be a girl. Don't try to be a dude. It doesn't work out. Ain't no think like a man. You're not a man. Why do you want to think like a man? So I'm saying, stay away from trauma. It does not benefit you as a woman.